Welcome back to Proxy, everybody, and today we're going to be talking about World once again, and we're going to be diving into the Dwarfs. So the Dwarfs are, of course, my favorite army aesthetically, even though their playstyle doesn't really match mine too much. I've always loved playing them just for the bristling beards and, of course, the epic grudges that they hold. So we're going to dive into it. I've been basically a longtime Dwarf player in Warhammer Fantasy. I played Empire a little bit as well. I dabbled in High Elves, but the Dwarfs were the army I brought to the battle pretty much each and every time, aside from really small games with those other factions. So I know a little bit about the Dwarfs and how to play them, and I've read up on the rules, and I want to share with you guys my thoughts about the Dwarfs. And I actually think reading the other rules, briefly of the other factions, the dwarfs are probably one of the more powerful factions in Old World right now for a couple of reasons, which I will share with you. Now, a lot of people have this qualm about dwarves, and I'm just going to address this right off the bat. Dwarfs are essentially a very stationary faction. They don't move a lot, and they shoot a lot, and they have a lot of magic resistance. So a lot of players going up against dwarfs have a bad time because one, you can't really flank them easily because they're stationary and because they have special rules that prevent flanking, which I'll talk about. They have magic resistance. A lot of their units have just basic magic resistance 1. Their lords and heroes have magic resistance -2, so it makes it really hard to cast magic against them. And on top of that, you have runesmiths and things like that that can dispel spells as well. So it's hard to get magic off against dwarfs. Dwarfs don't have magic themselves, but they do have certain things that they can use that are like magic, which again, I'll talk about later in this video. Now, the other reason people don't like dwarfs is because not only are they really resistant to magic and stuff like that, but they're really hard to kill. Basic toughness 4 across the whole faction. They have really high leadership, so you can't easily run them down in combat. And they have heavy armor base on almost all their units. They're incredibly tough to deal with, especially if they're just kind of castling around a hill or something like that, backed up by artillery. Dwarfs can be extremely frustrating to fight. So, does this mean they're an unbalanced faction and they're not very, you know, interactable? Well, unfortunately, some factions, depending on your build and stuff like that, won't have very good interactions against dwarfs. If you're running a very heavy magic type build, I'm sorry, but dwarfs are going to be good against you, right? I think that's kind of just how fantasy has always been. And, I've addressed this concern with you guys before on the channel, talking about magic needs to be balanced and so forth. And luckily, the spells aren't super overpowered or anything. But, looking through the dwarf index, they do have really high magic resistance. So if you're bringing, 2 or 3 wizards and you're expecting to get a lot of spells off, well, you might be getting a lot less spells off than you think. Anyway, we'll go into that, but I do want to address right off the bat that yes, dwarves seem like a very uninteractive faction, but I think in competitive play they're still going to require a lot of skill because, there's going to be objective play at some point, right? You're going to have to, fight for points and stuff like that. So, the slow movement of dwarves will come into play in those scenarios. But if you're just playing with your buddies to kill each other, dwarves can be frustrating if built correctly. So let's go ahead and take a look. We have the lore here, the mountain realm, of course, the beards of the dwarves. We have the Khazalid, which is their language. They're so cool. I mean, honestly, the total opposite of what I like to play, but I love the lore of the dwarves. I've always loved dwarves. Okay, so let's go and talk about the Grand Army composition. Basically, I'm just going to briefly go through this because it's pretty much the same for every army. But you can take up to 50% of your army's characters. Do you want to take up to 50% of your army's characters? Probably not. You're probably going to have closer to 25 to, 30, somewhere around there percent of characters in your army. You will need characters. They are going to be your major damage dealers and they're going to keep your army together, so you do want those. Take 1 king, Anvil of Doom, or Rune Lord per 1,000 points. You're going to want an Anvil of Doom. It's just one of those auto takes. I think that's going to be in competitive play, and we'll talk about the Anvil of Doom in just a second. But it's I would even say it's probably broken. But You're going to need probably either one of those. I would honestly take a king and an Anvil of Doom. That's just me. That's my playstyle. But, you know, if you're okay with one or the other, probably the Anvil of Doom. For core, you're going to want 25% of your armies. Well, you have to spend 25% of your army's points on core. We do have some decent core choices, especially because you can take a unit of Rangers as core and a unit of Longbeards as core if your general is a king. So that's pretty good. Now, Rangers are a very good unit, and I will get into them. And them alone, if equipped right, I mean, could be very, very deadly, very effective. It's funny because they kind of operate a little bit like Eldar Rangers, and that's why I really like them. So we'll get into those. They're pretty cool. Other than that, Dwarf Warriors, Quarrellers, and Thunders. And they're all decent. You know, I think Dwarf Warriors are pretty decent at holding. Quarrellers and Thunders are decent shooters. They're not the greatest. I think shooting in this game is not the greatest for the rank and file shooting, but they're okay. We'll go into them as well. For special choices, you have Longbeards, Ironbreakers, Miners, Slayers, and Gyrocopters. Gyrocopters probably one of the most broken units in the entire game for the cost, and I will go into why in just a second, but they're going to be an auto-include, obviously, so we'll talk about them. You can take up to 50% of your army's worth in special choices, and that should be the majority of your units, because they are the best. You can take 1 unit of hammers per king or thane taken. So you can't take many hammers unless you take a thane or a king. So, you know, I mean, it is what it is. Hammers are good, but they're not like auto-includes in my opinion, so there it is. You can take up to 3 war machines per 1,000 points. That means in a 2K game, you can have up to 6 of them. Now, I'm going to say this right now. Dwarf artillery is very strong. It's very strong. Cannons are extremely good. I know some people will say the great cannon's way better or whatever, but they're really reliable with the dwarves. You're probably almost never going to misfire unless you're really unlucky, especially if you're supported by an engineer. The grudge throwers, same thing, extremely reliable and do a lot of damage if they hit. And again, when they hit hard. And then bolt throwers are pretty good too. They're cheaper, and of course dwarf ballistic skill isn't the best, but you know, they're still pretty decent for the cost. You can take up to 25% of your army in rare, and I think rare choices, the only thing worth it is the Rangers, but of course you can take Rangers as core, and you probably shouldn't have more than 1 unit of Rangers in your army, so they're kind of, you know, they're kind of not really included. Irondrakes are great. They're actually a shooting unit that I can get behind. They're pretty good, and they're good against larger targets that your other dwarfs will have trouble killing. The gyro bombers are fun, but I don't think they're quite as good for the cost as gyrocopters. So they are good, but they're a little bit like, they're just like a fun unit, I think. The gyro bomber. Still cool though, still decent. And you can take up to 2 war machines per 1,000 points from the following list. You can either take an organ gun or a flame cannon. I'm sorry guys, both of them are terrible. Unfortunately, the Ogren gun is, I'll go into the Ogren gun when we talk about the Ogren gun, but it's just not good. It's a little bit disappointing. And the flame cannon is fun, but it's really, you know, high risk, high reward type play. And, you know, in Warhammer Fantasy, I know a lot of players like that kind of style, but that's not for me. I don't like it. When I play dwarfs, I want to play something that's reliable, something that's going to, you know, basically if I want to shoot something, it's not going to be misfiring every single turn or whatever, right? So flame cannon, decent, but I've just had really bad luck with it, and it's very hit or miss. You can take up to 20% of your army's mercenaries. Not going to talk about them because they're dwarfs. You don't want mercenaries. You don't want that mercenary scum in your army. Same thing with allies. Empire of Man, maybe, you know. But again, I really think this is more of a narrative play thing. I think competitive play probably will end up banning allies. I guarantee you they'll end up banning allies at some point because there's going to be too many broken combinations you can do with them, and it's just not good. So you can take a battle standard bearer for your army. This is an auto-include. Auto-include because it allows you to reroll failed leadership tests within its range. break tests, and that's extremely powerful. You need that in your army. You know, one bad roll, one roll of a 10 or an 11, your unit flees. With dwarfs especially, you do not want your dwarfs fleeing because they are at -1 to their flee tests. So you don't want that. So you need that battle standard, and it gives you an extra combat res, so it's not bad. Also, the Thane is a pretty good fighter, so it's not like it's a terrible unit. All right, let's go into Dwarf Lords. So Dwarf Lords, King and Thane. King is the Lord. He has Leadership 10, the only model in the army with Leadership 10. Arguably, you'd want this in most cases. You know, in 8th edition and 7th edition, when I played Warhammer Fantasy a lot, and 6th even, the King, the Dwarf Lord, as it was back then, was basically an auto pick because of this Leadership 10. You really needed that. In this edition, I'm not sure it's super important, but it's something that's good to have. You know, again, if it was up to me, I'd have a King and I'd have a Rune Lord. I'd also have a Thane with a BSB. So these guys are pretty good. The King is 125 points, but it can get pretty beefy. Weapon skill 7 is standard for Lords. Toughness 5 standard for Dwarf Lords and Heroes. Wounds 3, Initiative 4. The funny thing is he's Initiative 4, which means he strikes before, you know, your common, you know, men and stuff like that. 4 attacks is good. So pretty good. As for what they can take, now a lot of people are going to look at this and say, oh, you're going to have to take a pistol. I recommend when you're taking weapons and stuff on Lords, you have to understand that yes, a pistol's good if something charges into you, but you're still shooting at ballista skill 4. You're going to be at negative modifiers most likely. So it's a hit or miss for 5 extra points. If you have extra points in your army, sure, throw a couple pistols on your guys. If you do not prioritize pistols. It's just not worth it. You know, if it's between a pistol and, you know, more dwarfs than, or, you know, an extra war machine in your army, the pistol's not going to be worth it. Same thing with the crossbow or the handgun. The great weapon is good. Depends what kind of runes you're taking on them, but if you're taking defensive runes, great weapon is awesome. You do strike last, but you're a dwarf. You're probably going to strike last anyway, and you get a lot of good bonus strength and AP. So that's good. It's only 4 points too, which is great. A shield is good if you are taking a runic hand weapon. So if you're taking a, you know, weapon with a lot of weapon runes on it, you want a shield. It gives you a really good armor save. You have full plate, which is awesome. Plus you have Grommiel armor, which I will go over later in this video. But basically, I believe it gives you a reroll of a saving throw of 1, if I'm not mistaken. I think. Don't quote me on that, but I think. We'll have to go into what it does later, because I totally forgot. It either gives you a 6-up ward save, or it gives you a reroll of 1 on armor saves. Dwarf Crafted is great, but not really all that great with the Lord and Thane unless you take a pistol and you ignore the stand and shoot modifier. So that is pretty good, but again, you're hitting on 3s. I mean, I don't know. You know, most targets you're wounding on 4s. It's okay. It's okay. It might kill a model, it might not. But I wouldn't prioritize it. Ancestral Grudge, which is good. And basically gives you hatred against enemy characters, which is awesome. It means they're really good duelists. So in the first round of combat, they get hatred. If it joins a Longbeard or Hammerer unit, that also gets hatred against characters. Is it going to be that great on things like Longbeards? Probably not. But having hatred against characters for Hammerers is good, and I'll go into why when we go over Hammerers. Okay, so they also have hatred versus orcs and goblins. The whole dwarf army has this. Means in the first round of combat, you get rerolls to hit against those orcs and goblins. Magic resistance -1. Now, this is really good because this means that enemy wizards casting a spell are at -1 to their casting roll if they're targeting this unit. Really powerful. They have Rallying Cry, Resolute, and Stubborn as well. So Stubborn is really good. Means they, instead of, you know, falling back, they don't take the test the first time they make a leadership test. They just fall back in good order, which is situational. I think because of their high leadership, you're not always going to want to use Stubborn. You're just going to want to, you know, fall back and, or not even fall back, but, you know, just, what is it called? Give ground, right? So that's going to be what you do most of the time. But yeah, I mean, if you're going against a really high, strength, you lose like half your unit to some insane dragon or something like that. Stubborn does help with that. And dwarves don't run very fast. They're at -1 to their fleet rolls. So that means, they fall back at -1 and they just reform and they're good. Okay, so Dwarf Lords and Thanes, or Dwarf Kings and Thanes. Pretty good. You need at least the Thane with a Battle Standard Bearer, but, the King is also a good choice as well. Okay, let's talk about the Oatstone and the Shieldbearers, because I think these need to be talked about, and they're right here. So, the Oatstone is an auto-include. Absolute auto-include. Challenges issued by a character with an Oatstone cannot be refused. That means if you have a Dwarf Lord on an Oatstone, enemy characters cannot run in the back rank. They have to accept the challenge. Your Dwarf Lord is a very good fighter. They will kill whatever basically they come into contact with. In addition, a character with an Oatstone automatically passes any panic tests they're required to take, but cannot choose to flee. You're not going to choose to flee with dwarfs. You're just not. It's never a good idea to do it except with ranged weapons. They're going to be in a unit of Longbeards or warriors anyway, so you're going to want to hold as your reaction. Also, the dwarfs are primarily heavy infantry, so they're not going to be disrupted if a unit hits them in a flank and it's less than unit strength 10. So that's pretty powerful. So it's only 15 points too. I mean, why not, right? And it looks cool, modeled on a unit. Shield bearers are 60 points. So if you do want a more expensive dwarf duelist lord, definitely go with this. Gives you +3 wounds, gives you additional attacks like it's a mount, gives you 3 extra attacks. It's weapon skill 5, strength 4. They do have Grommural weapons, which means that they get armor bane 1, which is not nothing. It's not going to often happen to give you that because you do need 6 to wound, but it is okay. And they're resolute, of course. And I believe resolute just means they basically fall back and pursue at -1. So Born Aloft just means that it's split profile, just like cavalry, right? Cavalry gets attacks as well. Mounts get attacks. They're basically like a mount for the dwarves. So pretty cool. Again, if you're going to go with a duelist lord, definitely pick up the shield bearers. If you're going to go with a more cheap lord just for the leadership, I wouldn't go for this. It's just probably not worth the points. Okay. Anvil of Doom. Auto-include in every army. I don't care what people say about this thing. It is absolutely insane for 235. I know that seems expensive, but it is not, and I'll go into why. First of all, toughness 7. Nothing short of cannons. Enemy cannons are going to be able to wound this thing. Wounds 5. That means a great cannon cannot kill this in one hit, which is very important. If it was wounds 4, I'd be a little bit iffy about it. But wounds 5 makes it unable to be killed by one great cannon, which is awesome. Of course, the Forge Father also has 4 wounds as well, and I believe you randomize between the two. So, technically speaking, it could be on the Forge Father, but most likely it's going to be on the Anvil of Doom. They have heavy armor and shields. You can take runic talismans and stuff like that. Technically, you can give this a ward save if you wanted to, so that's really good. 4-up ward is available in our rune selection, so we will go over runes later, but that's good. Ancestral Shield means that they get a 5+ ward. Oh, okay. Okay, so they get 1 anyway. But if you wanted to upgrade it to a 4+, you could, because a 5+ is a little bit iffy. But I would probably just take this because it's free. So 5-up ward. Magic resistance -3 means wizards are going to be at -3 when casting spells with this thing. Oftentimes, they're just not going to do it, right? It's really powerful. They're skirmishers, so they're at -1 to hit. It just keeps getting better, guys. And it's unbreakable, so it can't break. Really good. And Grommural armor also gives you, bonuses to your armor. Again, I don't think it's a ward save now I think about it. I think it's, you get to reroll 1s to your armor saving throw. And Grommural weapons. This thing isn't going to be in combat anyway, so you don't need to worry about that, unless things went really bad. But, yeah. Movable object, it cannot move. Once it's deployed, doesn't move, which is fine. That's always been like that. Okay, so strike the runes. This is why you take this thing, though, because it is tough, it is hard to kill, but if it just did that, it would be a waste of points. You take it for this. An Anvil of Doom can cast the following bound spells. Now remember, bound spells can only be cast once per phase. But you do have a power level 3. So that means you're basically a level 3 wizard with this guy. Rune of Oath and Steel. This is probably the most broken combination I can think of with dwarves. Because if this bounce spell is cast with a result of 7 or more, the target friendly unit may reroll any failed armor saving throws. Now, that doesn't mean wards or anything else, but armor saving throws. That's really powerful on one unit in particular, Ironbreakers. Ironbreakers have a 3+ save. That is great for a unit on foot. A 3+ save, you get to reroll any failed armor saving throws. If this bounce spell, and also Ironbreakers get an additional, I think they get a 6-up ward as well against physical attacks, so this is really good. If this bounce spell is cast with a casting result of 11 or more, the target unit may reroll any failed armor saving throws and improves its armor save by 1 to a maximum of 2-up. Oh my god. So you're getting a 2-up rerollable armor save, and AP really isn't that prevalent in Warhammer Old World, right? Bows are going to be bouncing. Crossbows, I mean, they may get Armor Bane, they may not. So they may bounce, but I mean, even if you get Armor Bane off, it's probably going to bounce. The only thing that can realistically kill a couple of Ironbreakers here is handguns, and handguns don't really... Even so, the Ironbreakers are so tough, they're not going to kill much. They might kill one model. This is amazing. This is amazing. You do need an 8+, though. You do need to roll an 8 to get that extra effect. So it's not often going to happen, but you're always going to get the rerolls, right? I mean, you're at +3. It's like a 4+. That's going to happen. That's really powerful. If it just had this, it would arguably still be an auto-include, but it has more, guys. Rune of Hearth and Home. Until the start of your next turn subphase, all friendly dwarf units within 21 gain immune to psychology. Very powerful. It's situational, but it's very powerful against certain enemy types. So if your opponent, let's say, doesn't have a lot of stuff that is going to care about armor, like maybe it's like Armor Bane 4 or something ridiculous where like the rerolls aren't going to be that great, but it causes terror. Okay, great. Rune of Hearth and Home, I'm immune to psychology. I don't take terror tests. I don't run from you. I just stay and I fight to the death. So that's cool. Rune of Haste and Urgency. This is probably going to be used the least, but it's situationally good for objective play and stuff like that. So if you want to get your Ironbreakers up onto an objective early, if you're playing that kind of game, you get an extra movement, right? If the target friendly unit is not fleeing and is already moved, it may move immediately again. Pretty good. Its casting value is a little bit high. You're going to need a 7+ for that. Rune of Hearth and Home, very easy to get off. You need a 4+ for that. But yeah, Haste and Urgency, pretty decent. Rune of Wrath and Ruin. Range 27, casting value 9, which means you need a 6+. The target enemy unit suffers 2d6 strength 4 hits, each with an AP of -2. Extremely powerful anti-infantry tech, and really good against cavalry as well. So, oh god, this is a fantastic lineup. You can only cast one spell a phase, but there's multiple spells on this list that are in different phases, right? The Rune of Wrath and Ruin is in the shooting phase. It's Magic Missile. I believe this is in the enhancements or in the command phase or strategy phase or whatever it is. So that's really good as well. I think conveyance spells are in the movement phase. So technically you can try to cast up to 3 different types of spells, and between these two you can choose either one. I think that's how it works. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but I believe this can cast up to a maximum of 3 spells. Guys, that's pretty amazing. 3 spells in one turn at +3. And it's really tough. It's not like your normal wizard, right? And the other great thing about bounce spells, they don't miscast. This guy does not miscast, right? Like, you don't have to worry about double 1s or double 6s. Yes, your opponent will get the chance to dispel these, but even so, right? You're at +3 to your casting value. So unless your opponent has like a level 4 wizard or really powerful wizard, and just is rolling super hot, they're not going to be able to do much against it. This is an S tier model. I think it'll probably show it'll show up in most competitive dwarf lists in tournaments. Runesmiths are also very good. Again, I don't know if you need a Runesmith if you take a Rune Lord, but because by the way, these guys can also the Forge Father can also dispel things as well as a wizard can, and at 24 inches away from it. So it can also dispel stuff, just to let you guys know. Runesmiths are pretty good. They have Rune Lore, which is good, special rule. I can't remember what that does exactly. Let me take a look at this again. Yeah, this has Rune Lore as well. I think the Rune Lore is that they can actually dispel things, if I'm not mistaken. They can dispel as if they are wizards. Dwarf Runesmiths count as level 1 wizards. You know, a Runesmith is relatively cheap at 65. You can take one of these. I like to use Runesmiths as basically scroll caddies, they used to call them in Warhammer Fantasy. You take 3 runes of spellbreaking on them, and runes of spellbreaking automatically dispel a spell. So on top of, you know, being at magic resistance -2 for the unit, you're also getting basically automatic dispels on anything in, you know, any spell cast in the game on the board. Unless it's cast with irresistible force. But that's still pretty good, right? Forge Fire is also good. If it joins a unit, it will gain Armor Bane 2 and Flaming Attacks, special rules. So here's the thing about this, right? It's good, but it's not as good as it looks. A lot of people are going to look, oh, that's OP, that's OP. Well, it works for range units, but, you know, typically speaking, you should probably just think that even if you have this in a unit of Quarrellers or something like that, Armor Bane 2, it's only if you roll a 6 to wound. So it's not just a flat AP. So it is decent, it's good, it's just not like super good, right? It is, but it is decent again, so. And I think you're probably going to want that magic resistance -2 on a heavier unit, something like Ironbreakers or something like that, so that they're not getting targeted with magic that ignores armor, right? Because that's the bane of the Ironbreakers, is stuff that ignores armor. So I'd probably put a Runesmith in there, and I'd probably put, well, probably put my BSB in there as well. Okay, Slayers. Let's talk about some Slayers, some naked Slayers. So Slayers are cool. I like them. I think they're a little bit expensive because they have no armor and they're very easy to kill. So how do you use Slayers? Well, I always found that Slayers were really good at engaging things and blocking things, right? Now, 70 points may seem like a lot, but a Dwarf Slayer is unbreakable and it can declare a challenge immediately. So what you basically do is you declare a challenge, and that means no other model in the unit can actually attack. Your opponent has to either decline, and if it declines, you get to choose what declines, typically speaking. You use the enemy lord to decline, and then only like a couple models can attack the Dragon Slayer or Demon Slayer, and they're probably not going to be able to kill the Demon or Dragon Slayer because, you know, you have weapon skill 6, and you have toughness 5. So that's kind of what you rely on. And yes, sometimes if the unit is elite enough, they'll still be able to kill it. But if it's not, a Dragon Slayer or Demon Slayer can actually hold up a unit in combat for a couple turns, which is good. I mean, again, it buys time for your shooting. So I'm not saying these guys are the best, but they're decent at that. And they can, you know, go after things like chariots. The problem is that they have movement 3, right? So they're not going to survive a charge against a chariot. They're not going to survive a charge against a dragon or something like that. So most likely they're just going to die. And they do get death blow, but that's just not enough to kill something like that. So I think they're good, but they're not great. They get Slayer of Demons and Dragons. The Demon Slayer gets D3 wounds, multiple wounds D3 against Warp Spawn and Behemoth types, and Slayer of Dragons gets multiple wounds against Behemoth type monsters and stuff. So again, pretty good. They have magic resistance 2 as well, which is kind of cool because, you know, it means they can't get harmed as easily by magic. But I just think the regular Slayer unit is a little bit better than these guys, and I've always thought this. I think Dragon Slayers and Demon Slayers are cool, but because they have no armor, because they're, you know, easy to kill, they can't join units besides Slayers. It just makes them a little hard to use. But yeah, if you guys know ways to use Slayers, and, you know, because I didn't use them much back in the day. You know, I used the unit of Slayers, but I never really truly used the characters all that much except for fun. Let me know in the comment section. I'd love to know, you know, how good they truly are, can be. Or some cool rune combinations you can put on them. Okay, Dwarf Engineers. You're going to want engineers in your army. You're going to want to field at least 2 or 3 war machines. If you have an Anvil of Doom, I'd say field a couple cannons, you know, just to make up for the, you know, lack of anti-large in your army. If you are fielding, you know, something else, I think 3 Grudge Throwers is actually really good. I know some people will just say Proxy Hammer. You are a spammer. you're spamming the most competitive units, you belong in, the meta chasers group. I don't know. I just see dwarf war machines and I just want more of them. So yes, dwarf engineers are good. I think you should probably have one on your list. They're only 50 points. Here's the trick to them. They can take all these runic talisman stuff. Nah, you don't need it. It's not needed. They're just there for their special ability and that's it. They have Artillery Master, which allows them to reroll an artillery dice within their command range, I believe. Let's see, yeah, command range. So command range of 9. You're going to be able to be in range of all your war machines. And if it's Thunders or Quarrellers, you can reroll a hit roll of 1. And that's it. So this is pretty good, though. I think you kind of save it for the artillery dice roll. It allows you to reroll a single artillery dice, not just a misfire, guys, but an artillery dice roll. That means if you're not happy with the bounce or something like that, you can definitely reroll that dice. But you risk misfiring, so be careful. Okay. Entrenchment, you can entrench a war machine. Basically, it just makes it so that it's behind cover. Again, not great, but not useless, right? You make your war machine a little harder to kill. Stand back chief. This just gives him basically immunity to being shot by shooting or enemy spells, which is good, while within range of a war machine, so he doesn't get sniped out. So that's good. So I think you take one of these per army, just have him in the back. I would actually give him... Yeah, I would give him a handgun. Right? I mean, he can't take a crossbow, or else I'd say take a crossbow. I would just give him a handgun. He sits in the back. He shoots occasionally. He has ballistic skill 5, so he hits fairly often. He's going to be probably shooting something all game long. So I say this is probably one of the models you actually do spring for the handgun, but he doesn't need it, right? If you don't have extra points for the handgun, get rid of the handgun. It's not needed, but it is kind of cool. Okay. Dwarf Warriors. These are your core. They're a really good unit. They're really low initiative, but they have good weapon skill and good toughness, so they will stay in combat. They're only 8 points, but you are going to spend a point on shields. And you're just going to do that automatically. They do have shield wall, which means they can give ground instead of falling back in good order 1 time per game. You're definitely going to want to take shields for this unit because I believe you do need shields for this. They have close order. They have hatred against orcs and goblins, magic resistance -1, resolute, which is the -1 movement to fleas and stuff. Okay, here's the thing about Dwarf Warriors. You can spend a bunch of points giving them drilled and giving them veteran and all that stuff. It is a waste, guys. It is a waste. Dwarf Warriors are there to just sit there and hold for you while your guns shoot or you get your other, more hard-hitting units into a better position. That's it. They're not going to do damage for you. They're really not. Now, a lot of people will say, well, why not give them drilled so they can reform automatically right before they move? Well, I mean, you're not going to be moving that much. You're just not going to be moving that much. So I don't think that's worth it. They have really high leadership as well. So veterans not, it's good, but it's not the best. But yeah, but that's about it. Now, you're going to want to give them full command because you're going to want that combat res so they don't lose combat by that much. And will you give your veteran weapon runes? No, it's not. Again, this is a unit meant to just hold enemies in place while your other units take them out. They're only 9 points a unit. You'll probably take a block of 20 of them, and that's it. Now, they are heavy infantry. This is key. Heavy infantry means that units that are flanking you have to have a unit strength of 10 or more to be able to break your ranks. That means that a unit of 5 skirmishers, little skinks, cannot break your ranks if their unit strength less than 10. So if it's only like 5 models, it can't do it. So your Empire, state troops with little 5-man detachments that want to flank you and as you charge in, they're not going to be able to break your ranks. And actually, they just give you extra attacks against those models. So you're just getting extra combat res for it. So being heavy infantry is actually really good. It's a really good benefit. Absolutely. Okay. So that's Dwarf Warriors. Not much to say about them, but they're good at holding. They're close order, so they get an extra combat bonus as well when they're ranked up. Okay, Longbeards. Longbeards are fantastic. They have more damage because they have more strength and weapon skill. So you should be using these guys probably in the role of damage dealer. You can give them great weapons or shields. They do, in fact, have shield wall as well, but I think it might be better to give these guys great weapons because they're hitting at strength 6, right? At that point with weapon skill 5. So everything that goes through is going to hit hard. But it's up to you, right? You could use them as a line infantry unit, or you could use them as a damage dealing unit. Just depends on how you want to play them. You take full command with them. The standard runes, you might want to take a standard rune to give them extra battle resolution or, an extra save or something like that. That is, useful. Especially if you're using great weapons, you want to give them extra, durability if you can. I think there's a few runes on there for 50 points. We'll talk about the runic standards, but they can give them a little bit of extra durability against shooting, but I'll have to double check on that. The Eldar, again, this is you're probably not going to want to use weapon runes on something with only 1 wound. You don't want to save that for your Thanes and things like that, but you're going to probably have a Thane in this unit, so that's not a big deal. They have Gromero weapons, which means that they get Armor Bane 1, which is good. Again, it's just... Here's the thing, I don't think it works with great weapons. I think it only works with hand weapons, but I would always take the just straight up AP -2 over that anyway. Okay, so their rule is Venerable. Basically, any unit within 6 inches can reroll failed panic tests. It's good. It's not like super great. It's not immune to psychology, but you have the Anvil of Doom that does that anyway. So, yeah, they're good. I think Longbeards are really that damage dealing unit that you're going to use. They are 12 points a model, which is quite a bit more than Dwarf Warriors, but that's why I think you take them for damage, because as far as a unit that holds for you, you might as well take Warriors. They're cheaper. If you want something that deals damage, has that weapon skill 5 and strength 4 base, you're going to want to go with Longbeards. They're just way better for damage dealing. And again, drilled, I mean, you're probably not going to want to give them drilled. I don't think it's worth it personally, but that's just me. They have high leadership as well, so... And you probably don't want to actually change the formation that much either. Like, dwarves are very easy as far as movement goes, right? You don't need to change their formation too much. They're not super finicky. They're not super like that. You just, you're in a, 5 in the front, 3 ranks after that, and you're good. You got a 20 block, and that's it. That's all you need. Now, as far as heavy infantry goes, you can put them 4 in front, but I don't think that's a good idea. I think you want 5 in front for more attacks. That's just, and more character spaces to like put characters and stuff, but that's just my opinion. Okay. Quarrellers and Thunderers, let's talk about them because they were a kind of contentious unit for me. So, Quarrellers and Thunderers are good. They're good. Are they fantastic? Are they, game-winning units? No. Basically, if you're not taking Warriors to hold or Longbeards for dealing damage, if you have a Thane to, make them core, you'll probably have some Quarrellers just to fill out your core, 25%. Thunders, I think, are a little bit too expensive. They are 10 points a model. I know it doesn't seem like much more, but the problem is they have a lack of range. And in this game system, lack of range is bad. Because if you have range 24, it means your half range is 12, and that often means you're going to be in charge range of enemy cavalry and stuff like that. Whereas Quarrellers, 15-inch range, you're not as easily in range of things like, cavalry and stuff. So you don't get that -1 to hit as often, which often means that Quarrellers actually do pretty even damage with Thunderers, especially during the first turn. If you get first turn, you can shoot at enemy units at long range, whereas Thunderers can't always shoot. So that is important to note. So Quarrellers, I would take the Quarrellers if I was taking this unit. Would I give them shields? Yeah, probably. I mean, shields, it's just good to have +1 armor, especially since these guys have heavy armor. They are pretty decent in combat. They have Dwarf crafted, so they don't suffer the hit penalty for standing and shooting. Also good. They also have close order, so they get +1 to combat res. So I would actually take these guys in units of 15. And the reason why is because they can shoot you until they get to you, and then once the enemy gets to you, they charge in. This allows them to actually have a chance at winning, and maybe you get to fall back in good order, and then you get to shoot them again if your opponent doesn't actually catch you again in combat. So I definitely give them the shields probably, and so they can survive more, and maybe more of them will be able to shoot afterward. And are they going to do a ton of damage? No, they're not. But what they're going to do is they're going to allow you to trade with other enemy infantry that are core choices. Other core choices, things like marauders, right? They're going to be very effective against things like marauders with a lot of attacks, but not too much AP. And you do have toughness 4 as well, so you do have to keep that in mind. These are toughness 4 infantry. They're heavy infantry, and they're pretty decent at killing other light targets. They're not going to be decent at killing heavier targets. These guys aren't going to kill knights. They're not going to kill chaos warriors, but are they going to kill things like marauders or state troops? Absolutely. They'll be able to ping off a few every turn. So they're pretty good. Again, Thunders, I just think for the extra AP that you get over the Quarrellers, it's not worth the extra range. I would always go with Quarrellers. And they're also cheaper, so there's that. I really think GW should have just made them both 9 points, because right now there's just a clear choice. It's just Quarrellers, Quarrellers, Quarrellers all the way. You have other weapons that can deal with the heavier targets, which we'll talk about. Thunders, you should never take those unless you're just taking them for fun. Competitively speaking, they're not that great. But there is another unit that, if you love guns and you love them on Dwarfs, there is another unit that can do that for you. We'll talk about that later. So decent unit. Rangers. Rangers are, they're really amazing. They're the trolls of Warhammer Old World. So they do have the scout ability, so they can basically infiltrate. As long as they're outside of 12 inches, they can't declare a charge on the first turn, but hey, guess what? Movement 3, they're not going to be able to declare a charge anyway, so it doesn't matter. Crossbows and heavy armor, you can give them throwing axes for 1 point a model, or you can replace the crossbows with throwing axes. I would just give them the throwing axes, make them 12 points a model, get 5 of them, or, I mean, you could take a bigger unit, you could take 10. I would take 5 or 10 of them, realistically. 5 if you just want them to be a sacrifice, 10 if you actually want them to do reasonable damage, in the first couple turns of the game. Throwing axes are very strong. I believe they make they make good strength attacks. I think it's strength 4, if I'm not mistaken, with AP -1. But again, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. Maybe I'm thinking of past editions, but I think they're AP -1, strength 4, which is good. And they're throwing weapons, so you can move and shoot them with no penalty. Again, correct me if I'm wrong on this stuff, because, this is a transition. It is old world. I may be wrong on some of these rules, so just let me know. Okay, do you want to take any kind of unit upgrades? Nah, you don't. You don't want to take any of these. Old Deadeye, I'm sorry, Old Deadeye, but you have the same ballistic skill as a ranger, so who cares, right? We're not going to have the Old Deadeye. You can, of course, replace the crossbow with a brace of pistols for 5 points. Not worth it. I'd rather have a crossbow. Now, just to let you guys know, though, crossbows do suffer a penalty for moving and shooting at -2, so there is an argument to be made with just replacing the crossbows altogether. I do like the crossbows, though, because it gives you the chance first turn to pick off an enemy wizard. So let me kind of run you through what I'm thinking here. A lot of enemy, armies will not want to put their wizard in a ranged unit or a melee unit, because that makes the wizard vulnerable. So they'll just have the wizard kind of like sitting out there alone. So it's a perfect opportunity. You deploy your rangers last once your opponent deploys their wizard down there, and you just shoot the wizard. And with ballistic skill 4, standing still at long range, you're hitting on 4s, right? If you have 10 of them in the unit, 5 hit. Most wizards are going to be toughness 3, right? 3 wounds. Most wizards don't have armor. That wizard is dead. Even if it has a 5+ arm, like ward save or something like that, if you can force 3 wounds on a wizard, they're going to fail too. They're going to die. Unless it's a level 3 or above. So, I'm just saying, guys, it might be worth it to, just for 5, 10 extra points, keep the crossbows on there for that opportunity. I have done that before in previous editions. My opponents were very pissed. So it might be something that's worth it. Now, they have move through cover, which means they don't have the penalty for moving through terrain, which is good. It helps them, and it actually helps them bait targets too, because a lot of people will think they can catch dwarves because they're low movement, but if you're moving through forests and things like that, they can actually move faster than enemy infantry, so that's nice. And they have open order, but they also have skirmishers. You don't want these guys in combat. You want them as skirmishers, because then they can basically all shoot, and they can get line of sight easier to enemy infantry and stuff like that. So you definitely want that. Yeah, they lose some combat res, but you're not going to want to take these guys in big units anyway. So pretty good unit, honestly. I think every army should have at least one unit of 5 rangers at the least. At the very least. Hammerers. Very expensive, but very powerful. They hit like Longbeards. They have the same kind of offensive stats, but they have great hammers. Here's the thing about great hammers. They're not actually great weapons, so they don't strike last. And these guys have initiative 3, so they're like faster dwarfs. They have heavy armor, which is good. You can also take shields on top of that, so they're more resistant against shooting. You're already paying 16 points, but I would just give them the shields, right? You're already paying a lot. You know these guys are going to be a target a target for enemy shooting. Just give them the shields. Give them the full command. Drilled and veteran, again, I don't like drilled and veteran with dwarfs. I just don't think it's useful. But, let me know in the comments if you have a different opinion on that. You can purchase a Runic standard up to 75 points. Again, if you're taking hammer, you're probably going to want some sort of defensive Runic standard, just so your guys don't die to magic and stuff like that. And you can have a royal champion with more magic weapons. I don't recommend. Again, 1 wound, just put it on your Thane, put it on your king. Okay, what are their rules? So they do have Gromero weapons, but that's only if they attack with hand weapons. If they attack with their great hammers, they don't get that. They're stubborn, which again, it's good, but it's not like super good. Now, what really comes in handy is shield wall, which again, if they have shields, they get shield wall, which is absolutely glorious. But check this out, Royal Guard. Your army, okay, so it can include 1 unit of hammers for every king or thane. Any model in this unit joined by king or thane can issue and accept challenges in the same manner as a character. So this is what I was saying earlier, that hatred against enemy characters is really good with these guys. Because your royal champion can accept challenges and actually do something against enemy characters. What do you know, right? So that's actually really good. Okay, Stoic Defenders is really good too. During a turn in which it was charged, you're mostly going to be getting charged as dwarfs. You're not going to be charging often, so this is a powerful ability. A model with a special rule gains a +1 modifier to its initiative and attacks. Does that mean you're going to strike first? No, unless you are already really close. So unless you've already done a combat and you fall back in good order and your opponent charges you again, has a low initiative, and doesn't gain much of a bonus initiative to charging because of the distance, you're not going to be getting much of a bonus from the initiative, but the attacks is great. That means your royal champion is getting 3 attacks and your hammers are getting 2 attacks apiece. These guys are blenders against the right units. If your opponent doesn't bring the heat against these guys and doesn't actually take them seriously, if you just, throw some state troops in there or throw some marauders or something like that, hammers are going to go to town. So they're going to destroy, because their great hammers don't strike last. They have strength +2, so they have strength 6. Just a flat AP -2 with armor bane 2, magical attacks. Now, what this also means is that if anything is ethereal, it doesn't matter. Hammers will wreck it no matter what, which is awesome. So you can't just, tie these guys up with an ethereal unit and expect them to just be there for the rest of the game. They have magical attacks, which is good. Okay, so that's them. They're good, but they're expensive. They're not my cup of tea, but if you're looking for a hard-hitting close combat unit, this is it. They're the elite. Ironbreakers. So Ironbreakers are, in my opinion, an auto-include if you take the Anvil of Doom. Why? Full plate armor and shields. They get a 3+ base save. They're not that expensive. It's 15 points a model. I know it seems like a lot, but they're only 3 points above a Longbeard, and they get +1 to their save already. And that's just to start out. So can replace there's an Ironbeard, which is the champion, can replace it with a brace of Drake fire pistols or a Drake gun. I actually would kind of consider this, but not going to be shooting that much. I don't know. I think I would rather still have the shield personally, just in case it gets challenged by something weak. You have an extra save. Can take Cinder Blast Bombs. We'll talk about all those in a second. Can take Weapon Runes again. You're not going to want to take Weapon Runes. You're not going to want to take Drilled. You probably maybe want a Magic Standard, but it just depends what type. Maybe for, Rune of Battle or something like that. They have Grommer weapons. This actually matters for this unit because they have hand weapons. They also have Grommer armor, which means, again, they're getting that better armor save. They are a regimental unit. Now, the key to this right here, a lot of people don't see this. The key to this is you can attach Irondrakes to them as detachments, which means those Irondrakes can stand and shoot for the Ironbreakers, which is really good. It makes Ironbreakers extremely hard to deal with in combat. It means their combat res just flies through the roof when something charges them. It's insane. Runes of Protection, again, we'll talk about this. This is another again, an additional layer of defense. Shield Wall and Stubborn. They have both, guys, just like the Hammerers. This unit, unless you kill it with something at range, or a dragon or something like that, something ignores a bunch of armor, it is going to stick in the battle forever. And because of how the rules are with gaining victory points, you don't gain that many victory points unless you destroy the entire unit or force it to flee and break, right? So this is, and you're not going to do that, let's be real. With rerollable leaderships, you're having a bunch of combat res from these guys, they're not going to fall. Runes of Protection, here we go. 6-up ward save against any wounds suffered that were caused by non-magical enemy attack. Okay, so that confirms what I was saying earlier. Grommer armor is reroll saving throws of 1. Runes of Protection is an additional 6+ ward save. These guys are insane. These guys are insane. And plus, remember what I talked about earlier with that ability with the Rune Lord on Anvil of Doom? They're basically getting a 2-up rerollable, which is insane. So even if, yeah, it's just great. Okay, this is the ranged weapons that the Ironbeard can take. You get, a couple of pistols that have an extra strength over the normal pistols. Armorbane 2, Dwarfcraft, Flaming Attack, Multiple Shots 2, Quick Shot. Again, good, but is it worth the trading in the shield? I don't know about that. But anyway, the attacks in combat are okay, but they're not great. You do get an extra attack, which, again, I don't know. I don't know which one's better, to be honest. Having the shield or having the 2 extra attacks. A lot of people are going to say have the extra attacks, but you do have to pay 10 points for it, so it's not free. The Drake gun is 18 inches, strength 5, AP -1. Again, this is good, but it's not. It's going to be better on the actual Irondrakes versus this guy, because he does have Ballistic Skill 3, right? And I think the Irondrakes are a little bit better than that. So these guys are fantastic. These guys are an auto-include unit, in my opinion. I would take one unit of these, big unit of 20, and I would just sit behind War Machines and just say, "Come at me, bro." And I know people will be upset about that, but we're Dwarfs, baby. We're defending our holds, and that's it. Great unit. If you're starting Dwarfs, pick up a unit of these guys for sure. And they have newer models, so they don't look ugly as hell like some of the older ones. Alright, Irondrakes. Same cost, but they have Drake guns instead, so they do still have full plate armor. Fortunately, though, they can also take these Troll Hammer torpedoes, which are insane. Which, the Iron Warden can take a Troll Hammer torpedo, which is 15 points, which is great. Iron Warden can take Cinder Blast Bombs. We'll look at what the Cinder Blast Bomb does. Not great, right? Just one shot. Oh no, excuse me. A unit hit by a Cinder Blast Bomb suffers D6 + 1 hits rather than the usual 1. Pretty good. Pretty good for things like Overwatch, right? Because it has Quick Shot. So that's really good. That's really good. Strength 5 AP. Yeah, that's great, especially when being charged. Troll Hammer Torpedo range 24, Strength 8, AP -3, Dwarfcraft and multiple wounds D3. I like this thing because it's good at taking out things like trolls. It's just, Troll Hammer, right? But D3 is actually pretty decent. It's like, on average, you're getting 2 wounds against something with flaming attacks. They're not getting the regeneration, And if you're firing that alongside a bunch of Irondrakes with Drake guns, which also have flaming attacks, you can easily take out a troll or something with regeneration before they even get into combat. So I think that's pretty good. Also, Ballistic Skill 4 base, and the Iron Warden has 5. So these guys really actually hit very hard at range, and they're 15 points of mono, but you just take 5 of them because you're not going to be able to shoot more than that anyway. So you take 5 of them as a detachment to Ironbreakers, and you just Overwatch. You get a few kills. That's a few extra combat res. Even if your opponent kills a couple of Ironbreakers with their Lord or whatever, you're still winning combat. This is an amazingly broken combination. Now, again, I mean, I've only played one game with these guys, so I don't know how broken they are against certain types of units, but I will say anything elite charging into them is going to be repelled and probably beaten over the course of 2 or 3 turns. They do also have a 5+ ward save against wounds suffered by flaming attacks. Won't come into play that much, but if your opponent is bringing a dragon against them, uses a breath fire attack, they do get extra save against it. So yeah, Irondrakes are good. I'd take a unit of Irondrakes alongside a unit of Ironbreakers for that little bit of, Overwatch and stuff, or not Overwatch. That little bit of stand and shoot, it's pretty good. Okay. Do you have any other rules? No, just the Gromil armor, the rerolls, and stuff like that. Okay. Miners. I really always liked miners. I thought they were really cool. I don't know if they're that good, really. I mean, they can take blasting charges. Blasting charges are range 6, strength 3, AP -1 weapon with quick shot. Which is okay. It's not the best. You can only fire in 1 rank anyway, so it's not, you're getting 5 of these shots. It doesn't seem like worth it for me for 2 points of model, but I think the main thing with these guys, replace a close order special with open order. You're probably not going to want open order with these guys, but again, I may be mistaken on that, but I wouldn't do it. I would always have them in close order. They have a special rule, don't they? Oh, here we go. If they're held in reserve and you have a steam drill, you may reroll the d6 when rolling to determine whether they arrive on the battlefield. So, yeah, they're a reserve unit mostly. I mean, they can have some tactical play, but it's not like the other editions where they got to charge, with the Rune Lord, with the Anvil of Doom when they came in. So I would just be wary of taking this unit. I actually think this is probably not the best unit. They do have Vanguard as well, which means they can, move a little bit extra, which is good in the beginning of the game. Ambushers means they can deploy via reserve. And again, this can be very powerful, but they are kind of expensive. And, typically dwarfs are a little bit, stretched thin as it is. So I don't know how good it would be to hold a bunch of points in reserve. But that's just me. Let me know if you guys love miners. I think they're really cool, but I probably wouldn't use them too much. Okay, let's check out Slayers. Slayers are good. Their main thing is unbreakable, right? They're unbreakable. You do have to pay for an additional hand weapon, which is kind of terrible in my opinion, because they never used to have to do that. When I saw that, I was like, oh, that's so lame. They used to get to choose between them. They're a little bit cheaper than they once were, but it is what it is. Death Blow is pretty good, so let's read their... Do they have Death Blow here? I guess not. Okay, Death Blow just means you get an attack after you die. So if a model dies, they get an attack back. It's good. I think you take these guys to just hold a really tough unit. Like, a unit that your Ironbreakers or, your Dwarfers can't handle, you throw Slayers at it, and you just wait until they have to, kind of work through them. Okay, let's read Fight Me. Any character can issue a challenge and accept challenges. Yep. So that's decent. That's a giant slayer though. So that's not just that's not troll slayers, that's giant slayers. Slayer. When this model makes a wound roll, a roll of 4+ is always a success regardless of the target's toughness. Again, that's good against high toughness stuff, not really good against chaff. They are unbreakable, and I think that's the main reason why you take these guys is because they're unbreakable, right? Motley Crew just means you can have a mix of any kind of different units together. So Giant Slayers always occupy the front rank, pushing past any Troll Slayers to get there if necessary. That's so funny. It's like, no, I've slayed a giant. I get to find my death first. Oh my gosh, that's funny. Both the Sandbear and Musician will be Giant Slayers. Yeah, I mean, what's the difference? They get an extra weapon skill, which is good. Extra strength doesn't matter too often, and an extra attack, which is cool. But they're plus 7 points. That's really expensive. 20 points for a Giant Slayer. I probably wouldn't take that. I would probably just take Troll Slayers and just have them as a unit that's going to move block opponents and stuff like that. And that's it. I would not take any kind of standard or musician. It would just be Troll Slayers, and that's it. Basically act as a roadblock. You have the death blow on there, and yeah, that's all you need. That's how I'd use them. All right, gyrocopters. Gyrocopters are absolutely Giga Chad, and I'll tell you why. First of all, Monsters Cavalry. It doesn't really matter, it just means they have a unit strength of 3, I believe, which doesn't make any difference against a lot of units. Unit size 1 to 6. Okay, guys, you can take 6 of these in a unit. Are you going to take 6 of them in a unit? No, because that makes them way too big of a target. What you're going to do is you're going to just take 3 units of 1. And you're just going to use these to annoy the hell out of your opponent and prevent them from getting to your cannons and your other artillery pieces. So here's how you do it. They come with a steam gun. That is the best weapon. The brimstone gun and clatter gun suck compared to the steam gun. Steam gun is king. Steam gun is life. So we'll kind of look at that in a second. Armored fuselage contains or counts as full plate armor. So it has a 4+ save, which is good as well. Okay, we don't care about those weapons. They're more expensive and they suck, so we're not going to worry about that. Special rules. Dive bomb, fire, and flee is really good. Fly 9, which means in total moves 10 inches, which is good. It's a skirmisher, which, again, I mean, it only matters if you're taking bigger units, right? So that doesn't really matter too much. Swift Stride and Vanguard. Okay, so let's... And Swift Stride is like all cavalry have it, pretty much. All fast cav have it. So let's look at the dive bomb rule first. So once per game, unit can perform a dive bomb against a single enemy unit that is not engaged. To do so, it must move over the flying unit by flying over the unit. And then once this unit's movement is complete, the enemy suffers D6 strength 3 hits with an AP of -1 for each model in this unit that moves over it. However, for each roll of natural 1 made, the bomb is misfired and this unit loses a single wound instead. I mean, is that going to be used that much? Are you going to be dive bombing people all the time? Probably not. A good opponent will not let you do that. You're only moving 10 inches. So, it can happen. It's nice when it happens, but it's not going to be that big of a deal. You're definitely not going to want to take 6 of them just so you get extra dive bombs, because again, the base size is so big that you're not going to be able to move over a lot of enemy units. But here's where it comes... We come into the steam gun. Range, NA, because it's a template. Strength 3, AP -1, breath weapon. Now, I have reread the template rules, and it turns out that some players that were, in the comment section saying that, no, all enemy models are hitting on 4+, that is not true. If it's completely covered, if the model's completely covered, or if it's under the whole of the template, it's going to be a automatic hit. So that means if this thing goes on a unit, you should get 2 or 3 auto hits, and the rest of them that are touching are going to be hit on a 4+. Regardless, this is going to be much better than anything with multiple shots because this thing has ballistic skill 3. It's not going to be able to hit that great. So your brimstone gun and clatter gun, yeah, multiple shots D6, like you're going to be lucky to get 1 hit off, right? You're going to be lucky to get a single hit at strength 5 AP -2. Whereas your steam gun auto hits 3 and could potentially hit up to like 6 or 7 more models. Right? So like on average, let's say you get 6 models hit at strength 3, you're wounding, like against light infantry, you're wounding on 4s and basically killing anything in light armor. That's really strong for 60 points. That's really strong. Brimstone gun, you might kill 1 model, maybe. Same thing with clatter gun. You might kill 1 model. I don't think those are great. Right? If you want strength 4 AP -1 hits, there's other ways to do it. I would even say handgunners are better for that cost. Right? You're getting more attacks, you're hitting better, and handgunners aren't even that good. So what do you do with these guys? I think you go with the breath weapon. You go after light infantry. You go after fast cav, things like that. You go after things like goblin wolf riders. You get on the flank of a goblin wolf rider. You just aim the template right down, and you just fry all of them, right? You're killing on, 4+ basically once you hit them. That can do a lot of damage. The other great thing about this thing is it has move and fire, or fire and flee. So you can shoot this weapon, and then you can flee. Now, I'm going to have to look up whether you can actually do that with breath weapons. I can't remember. So if you do remember, let me know in the comments. I think you can, but it's something I was like a little bit off on when I first used this thing. And I thought maybe I'm doing this wrong, because it seems weird to be able to fire and flee with a breath weapon, but I think you can do it. Let me know if I'm mistaken, though. Okay. And of course, fire and flee is great when you have swift stride, so you can roll 3 dice instead of 2 for your flee. Okay. Gyro bombers. They're good. They're just not as good, I think. They have 1 more wound over the gyrocopter. They're much more expensive. They're 95 instead of 60. They do get impact attacks and stuff, but you're never going to want to use that, right? And they have fly 8, so they're a little bit slower. So as far as their weapons go, they do come with a steam gun, just like the gyrocopter. You can take the brimstone gun or clatter gun. Again, the steam gun's just going to be the best. The bombing run is why you take this thing. You can perform a bombing run against enemy models. You can do it, I think, as many times as you want per game. You must move over the unit, but again, it's less speed, so a good opponent's not going to easily let you do this. But you roll a dice, and you see what happens. 1. Premature detonation. You lose a single wound. Dud. It lands squarely on the head of an unfortunate enemy. The enemy unit loses a single wound, which is good. That's an auto wound, right? That's not bad. That ignores armor, but it's not great. Direct hit. Place a large 5-inch blast template on the unit, so that the center rolls directly over the center of the enemy unit. Once placed, the template will scatter d6. Right, so if you do roll a d6, if you roll a direct hit, you get a direct hit, but it can scatter. Any model whose base lies underneath the template's final position will be risk hit and suffering a single strength 4 hit with AP -1. So that's really good. Really powerful. But, you really want bombs away, which gives you 2 small blast templates, so it gives you a much better chance of getting those really great hits. But again, not as competitive as a gyrocopter, I don't think. It just seems like more of a fun thing. I would definitely run one of these, but it seems like more of a fun option. Okay, on to war machines. Let's talk about bolt throwers a second. Let me bring up something. I just want to refresh myself real quick on the bolt thrower rules. Give me 1 second. Okay, so bolt throwers. Bolt throwers are really good because they're cheap, and that's it. They're ballistic skill 3 though, so a little bit suspect, but most of the time you're going to hit on 5s. And it's pretty good. You basically, it's better against large ranked targets. So if you have you're firing something with 4 ranks deep, you're gonna get 4 hits. If you successfully hit, you're gonna get 4 hits. 1 at strength 6, 1 at strength 5, 1 at strength 4, 1 at strength 3. So you're gonna kill a couple models if you hit. It's not great, but the reason you take this thing is because it's 55 points. It also has damage 2, I believe, so it can kill models with 2 wounds fairly easily. Let's talk about the Grudge Thrower a little bit. So the Grudge Thrower is pretty effective as well. I think it's actually one of the best war machines because it gives you a small blast template and it's really powerful as far as the amount of models it can hit, right? Auto hits things that are directly under fully covered, and it hits on 4+ anything else that it touches. Pretty strong. Again, it's also reliable because it's a dwarf weapon and can reroll a lot of the artillery dice stuff. You know, you can give it the engineer, an engineer nearby can reroll a single artillery dice, so it's pretty good. So yeah, grudge throwers are great. They're 95 points, but for that 95, you're getting a lot of power. You're getting a strength 8 hit under the template, you're getting a strength 4 hit otherwise, and you're at AP -1. The cannon. 5 more points and you get a cannon. I'm going to recheck the cannon rules real quick just to make sure again that I'm saying the right things. Because I'm pretty sure I know them, but I just want to double check. Okay, alright, so here's how cannons work. First of all, the dwarf cannon is just a simple cannon. Strength 8, AP -2, which is still good, and damage D3. So that's good against tough stuff, right? Things that are toughness 7, it is going to be wounding on 3+, which is decent. Now, the other thing is you get the grape shot. It's 12 inches, but it's auto hits, guys. You roll the artillery dice and it's just straight up auto hits. You don't have to worry about hitting, which is amazing, which makes this thing, in my opinion, better than the Ogre gun right off the bat. It is range 12, but again, people are going to be getting in range of you, and yeah, it's going to be effective in those circumstances. So cannons are your anti-large. You do need some cannons in your army, in my opinion. If you're not taking grudge throwers for your anti-large for D3 damage, you need to take cannons because they're going to be able to kill monsters for you. And again, they're very reliable because of the engineering runes that you can give it. Rune of forging and stuff like that to make sure it doesn't misfire. Ogre guns, it's an Ogre gun. It's, you know, you roll basically 2 artillery dice. If one of them comes up a misfire, you're at -1 to hit. You're at -1 to hit anyway because you're probably going to be at long range. And, you know, most of the time that means you're going to be hitting on 6s. So, you know, there's a 50% chance you're hitting on 6s. The other 50% chance you're hitting on 5s. But, you know, who knows what you roll. You could roll, you know, 10 dice and just hit 3 times. It's a really bad, unreliable weapon. I don't like it. Personally, I don't think it's competitive. It used to be my favorite unit. It's absolute trash now. It's 120 as well. It's the same cost as it was before, and it's worse. Flame cannon, again, a little better than the Ogre gun, but still a little bit weird because it's very hit or miss. You know, you basically roll an artillery dice, add it to the range you guess, and then you put a flame template at the end of it. And the flame cannon is just not that powerful. Its AP isn't that great. So it's very good against the light stuff, but not so good against anything else. And against the light stuff, we have a lot to deal with that, like gyrocopters. Okay, give me a second before I get into the runic items because this is massive. There's a massive list of runic items here. Just give me 1 second to kind of read through these really quick for myself and remind myself of the cool combinations that you can pull off. Okay, so first of all, the dwarfs can create their own magic weapons instead of choosing from a predetermined list, which is awesome. But they have to follow the following rules. The rule of 3, no single item can have more than 3 runes on it. No model can have more than 3 runes from each category. Now, that's, you know, basically to stop you from just spamming something over and over until it's broken. The rule of form, no item can have a rune not intended for that item. For example, a hand weapon cannot have an engineering rune. Obviously, right? But of course, you have to say these things or else people are going to do it. Rule of pride. No 2 runic items in your army can be identical. This applies to items with only a single rune and to items with 2 or 3 runes. So this is, you kind of have to do, if you want to take multiple of something, you have to like add another rune to it so that it's not the exact same, right? But there's a lot of cheap runes you can do with this, and it's usually fine. The rule of jealousy. Each master rune may only be chosen once per army. Okay, so that's You know, I know it says the rule of jealousy. This is to prevent spam, though, and cheesiness. So it should be called the rule of cheese, anti-cheese, because that would be ridiculous if you could take multiple master runes on something. The rune of duplication. Only runes marked with an asterisk can be duplicated, combining together and increasing their effect. Okay, so those are the rules that you need to follow. Single-use runes are one use only. Once you use them, it goes away. A runic item becomes magical, I believe. Does it say here? I believe, yes. Okay, you just add for a magic item. So it becomes a magic item if you use it. So it means it can harm ethereal units at that point. Okay, let's look at the weapon runes, because this is probably what most of you care about, right? The weapons. You have the Master Rune of Smiting. This is one of my favorite runes. It actually used to not be a Master Rune. It just was a normal rune. So you could have the Rune of Smiting with something else. It's ridiculous. It can have multiple wounds D6. That's really good against monsters. I used to use this a lot with my Dwarf King, my Dwarf Lord, to bait monsters into fighting my Ironbreakers, because Ironbreakers are really bad against monsters historically. So I would put my king in there, give him this rune, and when monsters came in, back then you didn't tell your opponent what you had, which was, not good for the game at all, but you didn't. So they would come in with a giant or a monster or something, ignore his armor, and I would say, okay, my dwarf lord is going to go. I have 4 attacks. I have the Rune of Might as well, so I'm wounding on 2s, I'm hitting on 2s, I'm wounding on 2s, and I'm doing D6 damage for each attack. Insane. It would just one-shot monsters, I swear to God. Giants, dead. Dragons, dead. It was insane. So, can't do that anymore, can't combine those, but, Rune of Smiting is still good. Multiple wounds D6 is good, but it's expensive, so you have to consider whether or not, you have enough anti-large in your army in other places. Staff, the Master Rune of Staff Blackhammer, always wounds on a 2+, regardless of the target's toughness. It's good, but it's not great. Just because, again, if you're going after tough stuff, you're probably just going to want the Rune of Smiting with the multiple wounds D6. You're probably not going to want to bother with wounds on 2+. Especially if you're, fighting with a great weapon or something like that, you're already at strength 6. There's ways to give you +1 to wound already, so, wounding on a 2+, very situational. Rune of Alaric the Mad. No armor saves permitted. This is a great rune, especially if you're using, a regular, hand weapon shield, because it allows you to ignore armor, which is awesome. Again, situational though. You probably want this on a king or a thane, and not much else. Master Rune of Dragon Slaying. If it has a behemoth, always wounds on a 2+. This isn't that good. I truthfully, you'd probably want this. You'd probably want this on a Slayer, but that's about it. I would maybe put it on a Demon Slayer if I was, trying to have some fun with it, but I wouldn't bother with it otherwise. Master Rune of Flight, 25 points. It gives you a strength user, magical attacks. Yeah, not worth it. This was never good, by the way. It was always awful. It's not like it is in the Warhammer Total War, where it just destroys characters. Master Rune of Swiftness always strikes first. This is a great Master Rune. Always strikes first on a very slow dwarf unit is fantastic. It means that if you have other runic item or other runes on your weapon as well, you can be potentially striking first with a really high strength, which is awesome. So that's a good Master Rune. Master Rune of Breaking. Any magic item carried by this enemy suffers 1 or more unsaved wounds with, against a Master Rune of Breaking, is destroyed and cannot be used for the remainder of the game. This is really good in duels. So if an opponent has like an enchanted shield or something like that, you hit them once, maybe you wound them once in the first stage of the challenge, your opponent cannot use that magic item for the rest of the game, and the next combat, they're not going to survive. It is good, but it's only good for challenges, and it's kind of situational. But if your opponent doesn't challenge you and you don't challenge them, you could always just, attack that character as well and also get this to activate. Okay, now just the normal runes. So those are the master runes, these are the normal ones. Rune of Parrying, -1 modifier to hit. It is not. Remember, look, there's no asterisk. You cannot take more than 1 of these, unfortunately. I know what you guys are thinking, oh, I'll take 3 of these. -3 to hit. No, unfortunately, can't do that. I wish you could, but you can't. So that's a -1 to hit. It's still decent, but it's not like the best. Rune of Banishment, models with warp spawn cannot make any ward saves. Very situational. Unless you know you're going against chaos, I would not take this. This is one of those, like, this is what we would used to call a tailoring weapon. We knew somebody was tailoring if they were taking something like this, if, you know, your opponent was chaos, because, you know, unless you're going against chaos, there's no reason for this typically. But that may be different in Old World, I don't know. Okay, Rune of Fury. +1 attack. Solid. You can take up to 3 of them. It's good, you know, it's solid. There's nothing much to say about it. Gives you an extra attack. Pretty good, especially with something like a great weapon. Probably want that Rune of Fury. Although, I think magic weapons actually replace great weapon rules, so I would have to check that again. But yeah, it's decent. +1 attack is always good. Grudge Rune. You can reroll a single, so this is a single use. Oh, no, excuse me. It's just, okay, so this is what it is. For each Grudge Rune inscribed, you can reroll a single hit roll of natural 1 made during combat phase. That's pretty good, especially on something that's high weapon skill. I would consider taking this for 20 points. You know, you get a reroll one of your hits every turn. That's pretty good. Runemite, +1 strength. Perfect. That's really good. You're probably going to want to use this on your damage dealing characters. Rune of Cleaving, -1 AP. Also really good, really cheap as well, only 15 points. You can inscribe this multiple times. So here's the thing, like, you can actually get to the point where you're spending 45 points. I know that seems like a good idea, but at that point you might as well just use a Master Rune of Lyric the Mad for full, you know, ignores armor, and then you can go for other stuff on top of it. You don't want to use this 3 times. Probably 2 times is good enough, and then, you know, after that it's just wasted. Rune of Striking, +1 to weapon skill. Pretty decent, you know, good in challenges, not good against normal line infantry typically. Rune of Fire gives you flaming attacks. Rune of Speed gives you +1 initiative. Why would you want a Rune of Speed, you might ask? Well, because remember that rule of 3, you can't have 2 weapons with the same combination? Well, giving you a single Rune of Speed will change the combination and allow you to use that weapon. So that's why it's there. But, you know, also a Dwarf King with initiative 5 is pretty decent against a lot of other things, because, you know, there are things out there which do not have, you know, initiative 5. Okay, armor runes. So this is really where it starts to get crazy for the dwarves, because they're already really tough, and armor runes make them even tougher. Master Rune of the Adamant is really expensive, gives you toughness 10. Now, personally, I don't think you should do this. This is just my personal opinion. I think it's very powerful, but for 100 points, I'd really have to think about that, because, you know, it does make your Dwarf Lord almost unkillable, but there are things in the game still, especially duelist, you know, types of characters and stuff, who don't really care about toughness. So it's going to be really powerful against your standard lords and heroes. It's not going to be powerful against, you know, special characters or anything like that. So, well, not that there are many special characters, but, you know, if you have a special weapon that ignores and wounds on 2s, you know, like something like a Reichsfang, you know, what is it called? Not a Reichsfang. What am I thinking of? A rune sword, right? Now I can't think of what it is, but it's the Empire sword that the dwarves crafted for them. Then your Master Rune of Adamant is just going to be useless. You're probably still going to win the challenge, but, you know, you're spending 100 points on something that's not doing anything for you. And it also cannot be combined with any other armor runes, which means you're probably not going to have a great armor save. So anything that does have a high enough strength to wound you on 5, you know, on 6s, you're not going to get armor against it typically. You're just going to get a 4+, and, you know, if that weapon has any EP, you're just not going to get any armor. Master Rune of Gromil has a 2+ armor save, which cannot be improved in any way. This is good. Can't be improved though, so you might as well take a great weapon with it, because you can't take a shield, because it's not going to be able to improve your armor. It's good if you want to take a great weapon, but still want some durability. Rune of Iron, +1 wound to its profile. Again, this is good. This prevents your Dwarf Lord from getting killed by D3 wound weapons in one hit. So I would recommend, you know, putting one on there if you think you're going to get into a lot of challenges against enemies with D3 wound weapons. That's pretty decent. As far as the Rune of Fortitude, +1 toughness is good. It brings them to toughness 6, which means a lot of weapons are going to be wounding them on 5s or 6s, the standard weapons. pretty decent. You can take multiple of these to get up to even toughness 7, which toughness 7 is kind of like the sweet spot because that means great weapons that are strength 4 base are going to be wounding you on 5+, which is awesome, right? But it is 60 points for that, so you do have to kind of consider that as well. Rune of Preservation. Immune to killing blow and multiple wounds X special rules. Guys, this is a great rune, and it's also not a master rune. And I'm going to give you a few kind of options when it comes to that, of combinations you can do to really like make your character really tough in close combat. And just give me 1 second to do that. Okay, so you take this Rune of Preservation. That means in challenges, you're not going to be able to be killing blowed or multiple wounds X. So that means every wound is going to just be a 1 single wound. All right. Then you give yourself the Master Rune of Gromule. So I know that seems like a pretty insane combination, but this isn't a Master Rune. You can take this. So you're not going to be killing blowed. You don't have multiple wounds suffered on you. You only suffer a single wound instead. You're getting a 2+ armor save on top of that. And remember that unless they have an insane, they probably will have some AP, but you have the special rule of Gromrel armor, right? Which I think you can still have on armor, but correct me if I'm wrong. I think it gives you a reroll of a 1 to saving throw. So that's also pretty good. You have the Rune of Shielding, which you can take to get a 6+ ward save, which is decent. But there's another rune that can give you an even better ward save, which is actually a talisman, which we'll talk about. So you probably don't want the Rune of Shielding. Now, you can also do a Rune of Stone. Each Rune of Stone, you may reroll a single, and it's a single use, a single failed armor saving roll. So you take a Rune of Preservation, Master Rune of Gromule, and you can reroll a single armor save 1 time per game. That's going to make you really hard to deal with in challenges, especially against stuff with Killing Blow, any kind of duelist opponents. They're going to try to Killing Blow you or give you a multiple wounds kind of thing where they're just auto-killing you in 1 round of combat, like assassins and stuff like that. You can just obviously, defeat that with this rune combination. So I used to use that all the time on my Dwarf Lord, and it always worked. And, because people would try to get into challenges with them and be like, oh, I have Killing Blow. And I'm like, okay, I ignore it. They're like, what? Yep, I ignore it. And I have a 2+ armor save. Back then it was a 1+. I have a 2+ armor save, and I have a Rune of Stone, which, gives you the reroll. So that's good. Okay. Let's go ahead and move on to Talisman Runes. So let's talk about this for a second, but I'm just going to read a couple of things real quick just to make sure I know this, and we'll go from there. Okay, so the Master Rune of Calm is the first. You can cast a bound spell at level 2. And basically what that is if this bound spell is cast on any or more wizards that are within 18 of this model attempting to cast a spell must increase that spell's casting value by 2. This is very good. This is good on something like a, Runesmith or something like that. It makes it harder to cast spells. I actually don't like this though, because it does have a casting value and it's like iffy to get it off. Your opponent could dispel it, It's a lot of things that can go wrong with that. I don't think it's worth 50 points, but I do like the Master Rune Balance. Anvil of Doom and Runesmiths. Only once per turn, the bearer of the Master Rune Balance may use it when attempting a wizardly dispel. If they do so, roll an extra d6 when making the dispel roll and discard the lowest result. Just makes dispelling even harder for your opponent, right? Like, just makes it even harder for them to cast magic. Rune of Spite. Each time the Master Rune of Spite loses a wound to an enemy attack during the combat phase, a unit that made the attack suffers a Strength 5 hit with an AP of -2. That's only the bearer, though. It's not the bearer's unit. So I don't really like this too much. I don't really think this is worth it. Rune of Spellbreaking. This is OP. You can take multiple of these as well because it has an asterisk. So Anvil of Doom and Runesmiths only. Single use. And again, if you have the Anvil of Doom, you just have 3 runes of Spellbreaking on it, right? So the bearer of the rune may use it instead of making a dispel attempt. So that's at 24 inches. If they do so, the spell is automatically dispelled with no dispel roll required. You do not even have to roll it. You just dispel that thing automatically. It's pretty good. I would take 3 of these in an army just because I don't want any magic hitting my troops. So that's what I would do. Okay, Rune of Warding. You get a single use 2+ ward save against a single wound. I actually think this is a good Runic talisman, especially if you're trying to protect something like a Rune Lord on an Anvil of Doom. Just because of the fact that, if you don't go for the 3 runes of spellbreaking, I go for 2 of these and 1 rune of warding, just because you never know, right? Like that lucky great cannon shot could hit you, could wound your Rune Lord, could ruin your Forge Father, whatever, and then you're kind of out of luck, At least this way you get a 2+ ward save. So this is something to consider. Pretty decent. Rune of Luck, you may reroll 1 hit, 1 wound, or 1 failed saving armor throw. Also think that's pretty decent. I've never used it that much, but they do have, if you have 15 extra points in your list, it is good. Rune of the Furnace, 3+ ward save against flaming attacks. This is also really good for only 5 points. You know how many, lords and stuff like that are going to have flaming attacks? Having a 5-point item that can give you a 3+ ward save against it is really good. Lastly, Rune of Passage. Has move through cover. Any unit joined also has move through cover. This is really good as well, especially on big units of Ironbreakers that need to move through cover sometimes and will just be very slow otherwise. So, it's only 5 points. So it's again very strong. So yeah, we have a great list of magical items. Now we also have standard runes that you can put on different standards. So once again, give me a second to read through these because I want to give you guys some combinations that you can do with this that can make your unit very strong indeed. Okay, so we have starting off the Master Rune of Grungi. Now this is a really expensive standard. Gives you a 5+ ward save against any wounds suffered though. That's amazing. You put this on a unit of Ironbreakers. Now I believe Ironbreakers can take... No, I think you need a battle stand bearer, right? Standard runes can only be... Okay, so yeah, I think you can only do this on a unit of a battle standard bearer, but you're probably going to have your battle standard bearer in there. So you get a 5+ ward save against any wounds. In addition, while within 6 of a model carrying this, friendly units also have a 6+ ward save against wounds suffered during the shooting phase. So unit gets a 5+ ward save against everything. Units within 6 get a 6+ ward save against shooting. Incredible. 80 points. It's going to basically probably cover about 3 units in your army if you deploy close enough. Excuse me. And it's just a really good quality standard. It is 80 points though, it is expensive, so you're kind of putting all your eggs into one basket. But it just makes your unit extremely hard to kill. Master Rune Astronomy Redbeard. So you get +1 combat res within command range of the model. It is good. You do get an additional combat res on top of just your normal battle standard and standard results, but it is 75 points, so it is a lot. Master Rune of Hesitation. Enemy unit that charges the front arc carrying this rune does not count as having charge for the purposes of choosing which weapon to use or any special rules it may have. That's pretty good as well. If something gets a bonus like impact attacks, they don't count as charging. Note that unit carrying this rune still counts as having been charged, but they don't get bonuses for any special rules they may have, which is good. Rune of Confusion. An enemy unit that charges the front arc of this carrying this standard makes a disordered charge, which is very powerful. So if somebody has this, charges in, you're going to get disordered, which is good. It means your combat res is essentially going to be better, and you're going to win combat easier. Rune of Fear, they have fear, which I don't know if it's that good, but it's good against lower leadership armies. Rune of Battle gives you +1 to your combat result. Stole Raz Rune gives you Vanguard special rule, which means you can obviously move before the game starts. Pretty decent. Not the best though. Rune of Courage. basically automatically passes any fear or terror tests it is required to make. I think this is a great one, especially if you do not have a Anvil of Doom. Okay, engineering runes. So basically, to sum up the runes here, the standard runes, the ones that I would take are the Master Rune of Grungi, and I would consider taking either the Master Rune of Hesitation or the Rune of Confusion. Probably more the Rune of Confusion because it's a little cheaper. You can put it on, a unit of, Longbeards or something like that, so they make disordered charges against you. And I would probably consider the Rune of Battle for +1 to your combat res. And Rune of Courage, essentially. Okay, let's talk about the engineering runes. So give me a second to look over these real quick because there's something I want to tell you guys about them in how they work and kind of what to use on each unit. Okay, so the Master Rune of Immolation. So that's the first one. Basically, if you lose the cannon to combat, it can explode, and the unit that's attacking it suffers D6 strength 5 hits with an AP of -2. I don't like this. I've never liked it. Why are your cannons in combat, and why are you spending points on dealing damage in combat? Not good. Master Rune of Disguise is always counted as a behind full cover. Gives them a -2 to hit. It's decent, but again, it's not like the best. I wouldn't consider taking it on most war machines. Rune of Skewering is good. Gives you +1 to your strength on bolt throwers. It means you're going to... Oh, in addition, no armor save is permitted against wounds caused by a bolt thrower inscribed with the Runes of Skewering. I actually really like this because it makes it really good against, heavily armored units. But again, it requires you to take a bolt thrower, which, it's not everybody's cup of tea. You are mostly hitting on 5, so that does depend. Rune of Forging is something you should always use on your war machines. You're taking cannons, Rune of Forging. You can actually use it on more than just cannons, too. It just says a war machine, so you can use it on grudge throwers as well. So you definitely want to use it on either grudge throwers or cannons. Have at least one of these on them. And then, to kind of abide by the... What is it called? The rule of three, or not the rule of three. What is it? Let's scroll back a second. Let me remember what that's called. That is the rule of duplication, right? So, or no, sorry, the rule of pride. The rule of pride. You can't combine the same order of runes. So, here we are. Sorry. This is all live, so there's going to be a little bit of mistakes. Okay, so you basically take one of these on one war machine, and then you take one of these on another war machine with maybe a Rune of Reloading, and then you take one of these with a Stalwart Rune. So what do the other runes do? Well, Rune of Burning gives you flaming attacks, pretty standard. Rune of Reloading can shoot every turn, even if misfired or malfunctioned during the previous turn. This is pretty good. It's not great, because you're probably not going to be misfiring, but again, it's just something to put on your war machine so that you can abide by that rule of pride. And then Stalwart Rune, with calculating combat result, it has +1 to combat result. Again, you're never going to use this, but you might as well put it on so you can have your runes of forging. Okay, it's a shame they don't have the Rune of Accuracy. They got rid of that, which sucked. I noticed that the other day, and I was like, man, they got rid of that great special rule. Okay, so here are the special rules that the dwarves have. So Death Blow. Okay, so it's not even as good as I thought. It's just when you kill a model, you kill the Slayer, you get hit by a Strength 3 hit with an AP of -1. Pretty good. Not great, but pretty good. Dwarf Crafted, you don't suffer the -1 to hit modifier when making stand and shoot reactions. Pretty good for stand and shoot. Good on things like Quarrellers and, stuff like that. Grommural Armor. Okay, yeah. You can reroll any natural roll of a 1 when making an armor saving throw. That's what I thought it was, but yeah, that's a really good ability on a high armored unit like Ironbreakers. Grommural Weapons, you get an armor piercing characteristic of -1. Wow, so that's better than I thought. So disregard everything I said about being armor bane. It's actually just -1 armor. which is good. Resolute, -1 modifier to the result of any flee roll or pursue roll they make to a minimum of 1. Runelore, a model with this special rule can be nominated to attempt a wizardly dispel as if it were a wizard. For the purposes of wizardly spell attempts, an Anvil of Doom has a level 3, Runelore counts as a level 2, and a Runesmith counts as a level 1. And that's it. Then we get a beautiful picture of Ironbreakers. Here's Ironbreakers at the bottom left. They're very tough, and I like them a lot. They're a cool unit. Just give me 1 second. I want to kind of talk to you guys about something else about this and how to build a dwarf army as well. Just give you a little bit of a picture for a second. We'll continue in just a sec. Okay, so how do you build a dwarf army? So first of all, I would stick to kind of 3 war machines. I think in 1,000 points, you probably just want 2 war machines. In 2,000 points, you probably want 3. I think having more than that is just too hard to defend. So, having something like this where you have 3 war machines, obviously the flame cannon's out, you're going to have 2 cannons, maybe in a grudge thrower. 2 cannons and grudge thrower is good, or 2 grudge throwers and a cannon, whatever, whatever floats your boat there. You're going to want a Anvil of Doom in your army, and you're going to want probably a unit of just your, Rangers. You're definitely going to want Rangers. You're going to want Longbeards. You're going to want Ironbreakers with Irondrakes. And what are you going to fill your list up with other than that? Well, probably stuff that can just hold, right? Dwarf Warriors are good for that. Gyrocopters are things that can hold, enemies in place or, kind of like prevent them from moving and marching and stuff, which is good. Unless your opponent is, all drilled, unless they're fully drilled and stuff like that, they're going to have to take march block tests. Lower leadership units will suffer from that, so that is something to consider as well. I'm going to do a video probably later this week or next week, covering how to build a dwarf army for those of you interested in playing dwarfs. I'm actually going to also do a review on, high elves and things like that. So we're going to be looking at that as well. Gosh, these guys are so cool. Ironbreakers. These are actually Longbeards, actually, but, Ironbreakers and stuff. God, they're such cool units and such cool models. Really cool. Anyway, well, that's going to be it for today. I'm going to head out for now, but I will see you guys next time. And again, if you guys want to support the channel or, let me know if you guys like this fantasy content. It's not my forte, so to speak. I haven't played fantasy in a long time, but, I've kind of played a few games of Old World, so I kind of have the hang of it. And because I'm a veteran of, Old World and stuff, or, fantasy 8th edition, 7th edition, I kind of have a pretty good idea of what's good and probably what's not so good. So anyway, let me know if you're interested in that and leave a comment in the comment section if you are. All right, everybody, that's going to be it for today, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a good one, and peace out.